And, How are we doing? You good? Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Before I address non-football related matters, I'd like to congratulate the Washington State Cougars and their victory in the Apple Cup. It was an honor to present the Apple Cup to new coach Jake Dickert, and I think all of us were rightfully inspired by the Cougar football team that overcame a lot of adversity during their season and had a great Apple Cup. We want to look forward to Kayla Baron's tenure at the University of Washington, and we can't wait for the next Apple Cup. Now to non-football related matters. We're going to talk about our flooding that we've experienced most recently. This has been a severe event. We know hundreds of homes were severely damaged. We had one loss of life. And I just want to show my respect for the community and all the leaders who pulled together to help their community through this difficult time. We had great leadership from two mayors of Sumas and Everson, Mayors Perry and Christensen. We had the National Guard on duty, which we appreciate. We had the Sheriff's and Fire Department doing a great job. We had Fast Water Rescue that did some great rescues. And we want to thank the hundreds of local volunteers who pitched in both to do rescues and to help people with cleanup. It's been a very difficult time for this community. We're going to do everything we can to help them through this, both repair and rebuilding. We are actively looking at the damage to come up with a sum total to present to the federal government to see if we could obtain federal assistance. We now have a cash van to help with some cash assistance. And we're making some progress on some housing options that we'll have more to say about in the community for the community spirit they showed in so many different ways. The Lummi and Makah tribes are also affected. And you know, I was thinking about the Lummi tribe. They could not get food or fuel for some period of time because they were cut off by the floods, as were the Makahs. And at the same time, the Lummis have lost a lot of their Dungeness crab industry because of the invasion of a foreign species, the green crab, that outcompeted the Dungeness, in part because of warming waters, because of climate change. And I think what we saw during the last couple of weeks is the really disastrous face of climate change, which is sweeping across our country, our state yet again. And it is so painful to me to see and visit, as I did, one of the homes where the Nooksack River went right through the picture window, and know that those folks and more people will be victimized by climate change in the upcoming years. So we're going to have to do everything we can to protect this and other communities in the future. We're going to do what we can to become more resilient. We're going to have to build up our roads. We're going to have to build up our communication systems. But ultimately, we have to fight climate change at its source. You can't just build up the entire towns of Northwest Washington to avoid floods. We have to defeat climate change at its source, or we will continue to be overswept by floods and fire and invasive species destroying our seafood industry. So I will be presenting some proposals. I hope the legislature will act on them to continue our leadership in the state of Washington against climate change by building a clean energy economy. And I hope we will get more done in that regard. We also had a loss of our Chinook. The Chinook were damaged because of the floods in the Nooksack River, and we know how Chinook are critical to our orca. This was yet another loss to all of us, because as the salmon go and the orca go, so go we. So I hope this can serve as an inspiration to our state legislators to take more action against this scourge that we're facing in the state of Washington. Omicron, there is much we don't know yet about Omicron. We know that we will have more information in the upcoming weeks. But the one thing we know about Omicron, and this is a certainty, it makes sense to get vaccinated today, no matter what we find out about Omicron. Because right today, we're threatened by Delta. It would be really sad if people lose their lives today because they've been killed by the Delta variant while they're worrying about Omicron. Delta's killing people today. And we really urge people to get their first vaccine and their booster at the appropriate time. And now everyone over the age 18 is eligible for a booster at the appropriate time. That's the take-home message about Omicron. We do believe we have adequate sequencing ability to determine its presence. It's inevitable it will be in Washington State. It has not yet been detected. We have one of the best sequencing and surveillance systems. We're like 6th in the nation as far as the percentage of our cases that are sequenced. And as you know, we have a way of doing that fairly rapidly because of the missing S component of Omicron. So we will be active no matter what the science tells us. But the way to be active against this new variant is to be active against the old variant that is today killing people in the state of Washington. So we would encourage people to continue this effort. The best holiday gift you can give this holiday season, if you have that tradition, is to get a loved one get vaccinated and to be common sense on how we use masks, which we know continue to be very, very effective. Again, we want to thank the people in our medical professions who've now been at this for 2 years. They're still at it. Let's help them out as well. We have had good success recently. The booster shots are increasing significantly. We've had something like a 75% increase in the last few days of people checking out our vaccine locator. And we've got an additional, I think it's 30,000 doses in our quota from the federal government. And will that increase up to over 80,000 additional doses, we hope, in the upcoming couple of weeks. So people, in part because of the Omicron news probably, are increasing their acceptance and usage of the booster. We think that's really good news. There may take a little work because of the amazing demand for the booster right now. Keep at it. Hours don't count, but weeks do when it comes to booster shots. So let's make sure we continue to utilize this life-saving vaccine. We want to thank the Biden administration, beginning December 15th, Fema, in partnership with our Department of Health and also Public Health in Seattle and King County, will operate a family vaccine unit to provide adult boosters and vaccines for kids. This is an all-family affair, and it's going to help get to some of our communities that have not had as much access as we would have liked. This adds to what has been an extraordinary effort to get vaccines out to people. We have supported at least 327 mobile clinics just since June. So this is continuing to add to our efforts to get vaccine to where people are. And we know there's considerable demand, as I indicated. It's going to increase our equity as well. Again, I want to thank the Biden administration for being alert to helping out Washington State. We really appreciate his leadership. Budget. We will roll out our budget the week of December 13th. It's a short session, but we have tremendous opportunity to do good things in the state of Washington this year, in part because of our fiscal situation and in part because of our recognition of the need for action. And we'll be taking action big time this year, even though it's a short session. The legislature has been working on a transportation budget for several months, but they have not reached any deals in this regard. So my office will continue to focus on immediate needs, such as electric vehicles, transit, ferries, and matching funds for high-speed rail. And also importantly, the preservation and rehabilitation of our existing transportation network. And that will be reflected in my budget. Now, on the national stage, we see people's rights to the right of choice under attack in Washington, D.C. It is under serious attack. We don't know the exact result, but we see the foreboding signs that people's right to choice in the state of Washington will yet again be under attack in our fair state. So I can say that if you care about this right, and I certainly do, we are going to have to work to protect this right in the state of Washington, I believe. Otherwise, it will be lost. No one should think Washington State is somehow safe because of our pre-existing success in the state of Washington, leading the country when it comes to the right of choice. Our state is likely to be under assault yet again by political forces in our state who seek to roll back the clock to the dark days before the right of choice was protected in the state of Washington and nationally by the Roe decision. So I am blowing the alarm in our state about this so that people can become active now in the face of this onslaught. We cannot be passive. We have to be active in our state. And I'm asking people to join me, because I will stand up as long as I am governor, to protect the right of choice. And it is time to understand that is going to be under threat in our state. So good news. We have a Washingtonian, Kayla Baron from the Tri-Cities, who just finished a successful spacewalk to replace a broken antenna on the International Space Station. It's her first spacewalk. She'll be up there for a few more months. And she has yet again made Washington State proud about the adventuresome spirit and the scientific traditions of the state of Washington. Thanks for her leadership. We have Dr. Shaw, Lacey Fehrenbach, and Nick Struley also with me today. And with that, you may fire when ready. Gridley.
Either the governor or Dr. Shaw, with concern about your variant for future ones, what does the state plan to do to bolster testing across the state?
I'm going to let Dr. Shaw take the specifics of that.
Sure. Thanks, Governor. Dr. Umair Shah, Secretary of Health for the state of Washington. There are a few things that we're doing right now, as the governor has already alluded to, related to Omicron. Obviously, we're watching what's happening across the globe and across the country. We know there have been a couple of cases in the United States, so we're watching that very closely. We have also increased our genome sequencing, our current genotyping and surveillance activities. Typically, as the governor said, we have invested in about 10% of the samples that we get that we can genotype those. That is over time. What we have done as we're looking now is 20 to 25% of the samples that we have are now being looked for genotyping purposes. In addition to that, we're also prioritizing case investigation and contact tracing. People that are coming from countries where Omicron has been found, and or if somebody has concerns or symptoms, working with our local health departments, working very closely with them. And then I think the key message for us, in addition to working with our federal and local partners, is vaccines and the importance of vaccinations, as the governor mentioned, adult and pediatric, primary and boosters. So again, we want to continue to remind everybody, if you have not gotten your vaccine, please, this is a reason, not just Omicron, but the fact that we are really just coming off of our Delta surge. We have winter coming up. It's going to be respiratory season. We want to make sure that we have people getting their vaccines if they haven't already gotten their vaccines, and boosters if they're eligible. So I hope that answers your question.
So I do have a question, because obviously the person in California was vaccinated. So I guess my question is there a thought of trying to increase the availability and ease for people to do like the home tests, for example, so that if they're feeling sick and they can't find an appointment, I mean, I know the president today announced a plan that insurance companies would reimburse people. We all know dealing with insurance is not easy and quick. So should the states take the lead in making it easier, as we see in some countries like the UK and Germany, for people to just have a stack of home tests for when they're going to school, for when they're going to work, vaccinated people who are still concerned about catching one of these variants?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was thinking you were talking about the genotyping when it came to testing, when you're talking about home testing or other kinds of testing capacity. We're working to increase that capacity. As you know, it's not just what's happening in the state of Washington. We have to have the supply of tests to be able to do what you just said. Right now, that supply doesn't exist, although we want to thank the Biden administration for everything they've done to, one, call attention to the importance of testing, but also to make testing a priority for states and localities across the country. So we've directed our teams to look at what is the best strategy that we can increase our capacity and also make sure that people have access to testing if they have symptoms or around the holidays, they're about to travel, et cetera. We want to make sure that that capacity is there. So that's the strategy that our team is working on as we speak.
Speaking of testing requirements, up on the Canadian border, things just reopened, and we know that the Biden administration is setting new testing requirements for international travelers. Will there be an impact that we'll see, for Canadian travelers entering Washington State?
Yeah, everything that happens at a national level, there's obviously going to be some impact that we're going to have here statewide or, from a local standpoint, whether it's people that are coming over on a flight or people who are coming over or driving over or what have you. We're always going to see that kind of impact. What we have also been doing over time is whenever we have Canadian residents who are coming over for business purposes and coming back, that we've done what we could to also increase the testing capability and capacity in those counties that are bordering Canada that is helping. So that is something that we have been doing on an ongoing basis. It's still too early to tell. We're still getting information from our federal partners in terms of what's going to be happening with Omicron or something specific to what was announced by the Biden administration today. So more to come. We don't have that more to come yet, but I'm sure we're going to hear more from this.
When you say the sampling for sequencing is increasing 25 to 10%.
20 to 25, yeah.
How much?
20 to 25.
20 to 25. Okay, so what does that take in terms of resources and how quickly do those get turned around?
Yeah, it's interesting so one of the things that, and the governor actually had this question for me earlier today. There are a couple of things that we do. One is this full genotyping that actually takes several days. It takes 5 days, 7 days to be able to get the full sequencing back. But as the governor mentioned, there's also something called S-dropout, which essentially is a screening ability for us that tells us very quickly within a day that we can see if this is consistent with Omicron or not. And so that is something that we can get a turnaround very quickly. And again, our commitment is to continue to increase our capacity while we look for it right now, and then certainly over time continue to have the capacity that we've had. Again, Governor is right. We have done everything we can over time, last year plus, to invest in that lab capability. We should be proud of it in the state of Washington. It's an incredible capacity. At the same time, we also know that we have a new variant, so we want to continue to look for it.
So in terms of resources.
If I may add something, Doctor, I want to add something to your previous question there, or answer there. Look, the danger to Washingtonians today is not lack of any genotyping. We got enough genotyping. When this gets here, we're going to know it. And we're going to know how fast it is going through the population, which can be very rapid, unfortunately, as the Delta took over our state in about 3 months. The danger is we have 34% of the people in our state who are exposed to the loss of life because they're not vaccinated. That's what we've got to pay attention to. It doesn't do you much good to know you got this after you've got it. Now that will increase the importance of that when we have an oral antiviral, of course. But right now, what we're trying to focus on what the real danger is, which is people who are walking around exposed, and I heard somebody the other day say this, and I think it's probably correct. In the next several months, or maybe the next year, you're either going to have had COVID, you're going to have a vaccination, or you're going to be dead. That's what the situation is. And certainly with the new variety or variant, that becomes even more of a concern. So we hope people don't lose sight of the fundamental danger here, which is a lack of vaccination.
Can you both drill down on the question about getting those vaccines in the arms, because you're now going to, FEMA's going to help you set up another mass vaccination site in Federal Way. There could be more. And how much frustration are you finding from people? I mean, because I've been online trying to find booster doses. I've got mine, but others are still searching, and they're like looking into January.
The problem is access to vaccines, at least on a long-term basis. It's the lack of people willing to get them. That's the fundamental problem. There is a temporary bulge in the pipeline because people have come in droves the last few days because of the Omicron vaccine is scaring a lot of people. So the demand has skyrocketed. It is a relatively temporary condition. You will be able to get this vaccine if you want it. You might have to wait a day or two. And we encourage people, by the way, to just make one appointment. Some people have made multiple appointments, not cancel them, and this has fouled up our system. So I'm confident we're going to get people boosters in an appropriate level of time. But that's not going to solve the problem if 34% of the people in the state of Washington don't get their first shot. And that's the danger right now.
Well, then why is this FEMA vaccination site being established here?
Because it's helpful, particularly well, you have to ask the president why he favored us, but he did. And maybe because of the leadership we've shown on this subject, but it is going to help us go to one area in South King County that has a relatively low vaccination site. Look, we appreciate this, but I don't want to overstate. This is not a mass vaccination site. It's going to have capacity of about 300 vaccinations a day. And we have done, as I've indicated, this is one bus, but we've had 350 of these mobile clinics we've done just since June ourselves and in combination with our partners. So we appreciate it, but the problem is people just have not been signing up to get them.
Governor, can I?
Yeah.
One quick. The other thing I want to add to what the governor said is that also CDC made a change this week, as you know, and more people all of a sudden became in the category of being recommended to get a booster. So remember, previously it was 50 and above, and then this week, because of Omicron and other things that the administration was looking at, they went ahead and made the change, so 18 and above. So as the governor is absolutely right, there is a temporary bump because all of a sudden you have an increased demand, which our call center, our vaccine locator tool is all seeing, but we know that that's going to smooth out. We're doing everything we can to, one, increase capacity, but where we can also is to bring more vaccine into the state.
You are seeing a bump in your own because of your website and everything else, the state's website, to help people direct them to vaccines. Do you have any metrics on that at all in terms of how many more inquiries, how many more hits that you're seeing?
Yet the governor said that we, at our hotline, our 833 Vax Help, we've had greater than 30% increase. And on our vaccine locator tool on our website, we've had about a 75% increase. And that's this week compared to previous weeks. The week of Thanksgiving is a hard week because obviously their demand gets a little bit hard to focus on there. But the weeks prior to that compared to this week, we've had a significant increase.
Will FEMA set up more than this one, which sounds like you weren't really expecting that. You didn't ask for that.
Governor, I'll answer this, and if you have anything you want to add. What I would just say is that we're appreciative of what FEMA and the Biden administration is doing, but I will say that we have been focusing with our caravan activities, Western Washington, Eastern Washington, large communities, rural communities. We've been focusing on places where there's vaccine access challenges. We've focused on going into areas wherever we can to be as mobile as we can. So what this does is it just adds an additional capacity, particularly in South King County. And we want to thank our partners at Public Health Seattle King County because they identified some areas where they thought that it could help, and that's where we move forward with addressing. So with the press release that came out earlier today, you can see that it is in both Auburn as well as in Federal Way. So there are going to be a couple locations we're going to be able to move around. It is not a mass vaccination site. I want to be very clear. This is a mobile vaccine unit, an MVU. It is not a mass vaccination site. And that is what gives the opportunity of going between one location and another.
Yes, just a couple of quick points on the mobile vaccination unit. We started working on this with the federal government and our partners in King County before we all learned about Omicron over the weekend. And it really is to help us close geographic gaps in that community to access to vaccines, as well as racial and ethnic equity gaps that we need to close in support of our goal of vaccinating as Washingtonians as quickly and equitably as possible. I also want to note that we are using that mobile vaccination unit, which is focused on family vaccinations So they will have pediatric doses for 5 to 11-year-olds, as well as all 3 presentations of vaccine for adolescents and adults. We are using that as a hub to allow us to go out and do vaccinations in other types of settings like long-term care or adult family homes in partnership with our local partners. So this is an asset to help us increase the number of young children vaccinated who just became eligible and get people boosters as well as their primary series if they have not started it. I also wanted to note that we have been working with the federal government to get additional supply of vaccine into our state, and they have approved 30,000 additional doses over our ordering cap this week to help close some of these or narrow the pressure that we're feeling among the public to get people vaccinated. And we want to do this and are working with the federal government to get even more doses above those 30,000.
In some cases, and this is going off of Glenn's question, we've been hearing people who aren't able to get an appointment for weeks, like talking about into the month of January, and here we are at the beginning of December, and they're going to be waiting 4 to 5, 6 weeks before they can get into an appointment. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that people have been trying multiple sites, multiple, calling different agencies, trying to find appointments, can't find them.
Yeah, this is a pandemic. We are in a pandemic, and there's an emergency situation, and we now have a booster, and people have now woken up to danger, in part because of the Omicron situation, and so demand has skyrocketed, and your state is answering that by increasing the dosages that are available and increasing the places where one can get it. As we've indicated, we will be receiving an additional 30,000 doses trying to respond to the situation you're talking about. And we will be requesting another 80,000 doses on top of that increase to respond to this issue. But you can't have all of a sudden tens of thousands of people wake up and decide they want the booster and all of a sudden have everything happen in the first 8 hours. That's just the situation we're in. But this is good news. It is good news, big time, that tens of thousands of people in the state of Washington have figured out, I need to get my booster. That's really good news. And we are confident that people will get the booster in timely fashions. And here's the reason. The booster you don't fall off the cliff if you get it Tuesday instead of Monday. This is a gradual waning. So people should not panic if they have to wait a week or 2 or 3 on this, as long as we get it in a reasonable time period. So again, we're confident we're going to get people boosted who want to get boosted. We're confident we're going to get additional vaccines. But what we have problems with are the 34% of the state of Washington who aren't getting the vaccine. That's what's really dangerous right now in our society. So we would love to people have no frustration about this, but we're doing everything we can to get them this vaccine.
Speaking of these boosters, are you thinking of mandating them as part of your vaccine?
We haven't serious consideration to that at the moment. It could happen. We have not given serious consideration to it at the moment.
And on a different topic, the Senate Democratic leadership sent you a letter urging you to delay implementation of lockdowns for a year. They have several reasons. One is they want to do the fixes first. They're also concerned about imposing a tax on people during a pandemic. You haven't been super open to this idea, but is your thinking changing? Is that letter?
I do not have the authority to make some unilateral decision like that. It would take some action by the legislature. But I am sensitive and empathetic to the need some changes in this bill. And so I am talking to legislators about other approaches that could allow them to pause, if you will, some of the actions to allow them to make refinements to the bill. So I am talking to them about other options to be able to accomplish that end. And I think those may be possible.
Maybe talk about a special session to have them come in and do this because it starts January 1st before they can.
That would be one possibility, but there is another avenue we are pursuing. I won't go into all the technicalities of it. That would basically pause the collection of any taxes associated with this while the legislature makes these refinements. And we're exploring that with legislators as we speak.
So, but would that take an action from you to do that if it's done before the legislature?
probably, it would not take an emergency declaration, which again, I do not have authority to do that in this case. This has nothing to do with COVID. So it would not be through an emergency declaration as they requested in the letter. There is another mechanism that basically, because we do not collect the tax directly from the employee, it's essentially withheld by the employer, and it's not due to the state till April. So by not seeing collections from the employers till April, it could give the legislature time to make these refinements. But we're seeking a legal clarification of that to make sure that's the case. And that's what we're waiting on to get legal clarity on it.
When do you anticipate that occurring since we are?
In days, I hope. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally different subject. Right now, Washington is having a sort of a boom in wind turbines and solar panel farms. And they are in sort of a lot of the prime lands for these renewable resources or shrub step and critical habitat. Have you, has this collision reached your radar screen yet? And also, we have to balance renewable resources, which is one of your main pushes, against preserving critical habitat. How do you balance the two? Should one take a priority over the other?
Well, I don't think there's any black and white. What I would say is, how do we consider these decisions? We do it by having broad-scale input from the public, adequate consultation with the tribes, and we're making really good progress on an improved way to have consultation with the tribes on siting, and that's going very, very well. We have a meeting with the tribes next week, I believe, about this. Hope to finalize that. We follow the law, we get good science, and we make a community decision. That's the best thing I can say. I think to date, we have been quite successful in our siting that has not resulted in damage to the environment. We know Donald Trump hated wind turbines because he said he killed all the birds. That's not the case. We have been able to site wind turbines in a way that did not have huge detriment to bird life because we've responded to the science when we do the siting decisions. So we have to be alert when we do make siting decisions to take those things into consideration, be willing to be flexible on some of the siting things that we do, but we've been able to do that so far. So we want to continue those efforts.
Governor, the president came out and said there's going to be no more lockdowns just a couple days ago. Is the president speaking on behalf of Washington State when he says that? Are lockdowns or phase restrictions still on the table at this point?
Well, no, we don't have any active consideration of, quote, lockdowns. I would note, we don't have lockdowns. Somehow there's this perception out there that I don't know where it comes from, that we got lockdown. We don't have lockdowns. Restaurants are open, Apple Cup's open, movies are open, people going to work. We don't have lockdowns. And I hear a lot of my friends, many on the other side of the aisle, complaining about lockdowns. We don't have them. And one of the reasons we don't have them is because we've done a good job on vaccines, relatively, one of the best in the country, and masks that has been able to at least reduce the death rate in our state. So no, that's not under active consideration. And I do believe if we continue to increase our vaccination rates and continue to use common sense measures in the right circumstances with masking, they won't have to be in consideration. We have tools to prevent that. And it's a vaccine and a mask, and they're readily available. And they're almost free. And they allow us to go about and do everything we want to do in life. You know, it makes kissing a little awkward, I suppose, but almost everything else is possible. So I don't think that's going to be in the cards, either in the state. But I will also say this. We don't know what the Omicron virus is going to do to the rates of transmission, to the virulence of the virus, or the ability of the vaccine, although we do believe it is extremely highly likely, you will be better off with the vaccine against the Omicron virus than without. You can almost see that with a certainty. How much remains to be seen, but almost with a certainty, you will be better off with the vaccine than without it against the Omicron virus. But we don't know what its transmission rate is at the moment, and there certainly well could be additional measures we have to take to increase our vaccination rate. 34%, as I've indicated, of Washingtonians today are walking around with a time bomb in their backpack because they're not vaccinated. And we've been fortunate to date by having some declining numbers, but that's not a certainty, particularly with this new variant. So it is possible that we'd have to take measures to increase that vaccination rate. We are watching with interest the legal interpretation of the Biden administration rule regarding vaccine mandates and testing mandates at workplaces, and that may be a possibility. And I agree with that policy that the president has proposed, but obviously it has to pass judicial muster.
I want to make sure we got everybody in the room before we go to the phone. Any other? I have a question for Dr. Shaw. Can you give an update on where we are with wasted doses and how the boosters kind of play into that? Because I assume we're at a point where like more people are wanting boosters than first or second doses. So can you just, does that mean we're wasting more of the first and second ones?
I'm not sure I got the connection with boosters.
Well, I'm just thinking more people are now searching for booster appointments than they are first and second doses. Does that mean we just have first and second doses that aren't being used because those 34% of people aren't getting?
Oh, I see. So, the vaccine is the same. Moderna vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, the J&J vaccine is the same. Whether you're getting a primary vaccine, your first dose, your second dose, or if you're getting a booster dose, an additional dose. So the vaccine is the same. There's really not that connection there. But I will say that we continue to monitor what's happening with wastage. I don't have the numbers right now, but we continue to monitor that. It's a very low percentage. But I think the most important thing is, as we've been saying this whole week, and we've been actually saying even prior to Thanksgiving, is this is a time for people to get their vaccines if they haven't gotten even their first dose, and this is also a time for people to get boosters. And we haven't emphasized this today, but we've been also saying that this is also a time for parents to get their kids vaccinated. So all that comes together in how we can protect each other from this virus.
No, I'm okay.
Just very quickly, Governor, on the comments you made about abortion rights in the state of Washington being under threat, can you explain that more? Because my understanding is we have very strong laws. We have mandates for insurance companies to cover abortions. What threat are you seeing, especially with you in the governor's office and Democrats in charge of the laws?
The Republican Party. The Republican Party, which is the party of Donald Trump, is bound and determined to take away the right of choice from people in the state of Washington. And the moment that they hold enough elective offices to do that, they will do that. And the point I'm trying to make is we have had a political situation in our state that has prevented this to date. The combination of the Democratic Party and Roe versus Wade has protected Washington state. But I believe it is likely that Roe versus Wade will either be eliminated or severely reduced by the Supreme Court in the next several months. And when that happens, unless a party that's committed to the right of choice continues in the majority, these things are at risk. This is the driving force of that party right now. And we have to realize that. Now, I love to be bipartisan. I'd love to have more Republicans help on climate change. I'd love to have more Republicans help on our right of choice. But we don't have that right now in our state. So this is what I'm trying to alert people to, that we have been fortunate today. Look, it was a Republican, my predecessor, Joel Pritchard, who was one of the leaders of the initiative that established the right of choice by popular vote, one of the first in the country. That was a Republican, but that Republican Party just doesn't exist anymore. It's a Donald Trump party. And I'm confident Joel Pritchard would have the same concerns I do at this point. who was a tremendous Republican member of the legislature and Congress. But that's not the situation today, and we have to be alert to that.
All right, let's go to the meeting. Tony?
First question comes from Jerry Cornfield with the Everett Herald. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, Governor, actually two questions. I wanted to clarify one issue with the long-term care and then one budget question. Did I understand you say you do support delaying the collections of the long-term care tax in order for the legislature to have time to make the fixes? Is that right?
Yeah, if the legislature has a meaningful way to do that, I think that that makes sense. If they have a meaningful way to do it, and if they have an intention to do that. And I'm talking to legislators about that, about those potential opportunities right now.
And then on the budget, the most recent revenue forecast showed a $3.6 billion in added revenues for this budget cycle. And as you know, you and the Democrats have worked to get rid of the state's regressive tax system or make it less regressive. So will you use some of that money to reduce the state's share of the state's portion of the sales tax, which would probably be the most direct way to reduce regressivity of the tax system?
I don't want to give away our policy proposals, but I doubt that's going to be one of my proposals.
Last question comes from Hannah Scott with Cairo Radio. Go ahead, Hannah.
Great, thank you so much. I have one question for Dr. Shaw, but quickly a clarification question for the governor. Governor, on the issue of Roe v. Wade being threatened, I just want for clarity, are you saying that Washingtonians should vote Democrat in the upcoming election if they want to protect the right to choose?
Yes. It is clear there is a substantial difference in the two parties right now. We have the Republican Party dominated by Donald Trump. There's no signs of that abating. He is committed. He put 3 people on the Supreme Court who we know are intent on eliminating Roe versus Wade as soon as they can. And that party is heading that direction. And I wish it were not so. But that's simply the case. And I think it's sad because, again, we were led by a Republican, Joel Pritchard, at one time who was committed to a right of choice in our state. Now, you probably will find some Republicans that say, oh, no, it's not me. But those people are putting people into power, like Donald Trump, who are doing everything they can to eliminate this right, including electing people in leadership positions. So it's a simple reality we have to understand.
Thank you. And quickly for Dr. Shaw, can you speak at all to the contact tracing goals and where they're at right now? It looks like the most recent report has you just reaching 25% of people in one day, with the goal normally 90%. So it looks like you're only getting to about half. Can you speak to that?
Actually, I'm going to ask Lacey also to weigh in on this. You know, what I would say is that we continue to do whatever we can from both a case investigation and contact tracing standpoint. And I think one really important thing that people can do to help us is when you see a Department of Health giving you a call or one of our local partners, it may very well be for this reason. And we want to make sure you pick up the phone. We've had also an incredible success with WA Notify. We've got 42, I believe, or 43% of Washingtonians that have been able to use the WA Notify, and that's been an incredibly successful endeavor when it comes to contact tracing and case investigation. But I think you speak to the right issue, which is it's a matter of being able to reach people, and we want to make sure that people pick up the phone and help us. Lacey, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think you covered some of the big issues really well, Dr. Shaw. There are a number of factors that impact our success on that metric, Hannah, and it includes one, the volume of cases that we are investigating and following up on, and two, the public's cooperation with us. We do prioritize cases and contact tracing when disease levels are high, and certainly right now we're going to be prioritizing cases or close contacts that maybe have a travel history that could put them at higher risk for Omicron, or if they're a known close contact of Omicron. But it is extremely important, and it is extremely helpful to us if people answer the call when they see Washington Department of Health on their phone.
Thank you.
Any final words, Governor?
Just one, while people are looking for their booster shot, we know there might be some delay for them to do that. We want them to keep it up. We're going to get the vaccines. We have increasing supplies. We're going as fast as we can to get those increasing supplies. The administration is cooperating with us, and they are responding to our increased demand that we are seeing. This is a really good sign that more people are getting a booster. But I do ask people who are getting a booster to also try to bring somebody with you. Bring a nephew, bring a neighbor, bring your parent, bring your uncle, bring your brother or sister to get their first shot. Because those are the people who are at greatest risk in our society. And we hope you come as a twosome. That's even better. With that, be well. Take care.